themselves, and if I just call you out and you let us know where you're working, which CDT, and obviously who you are. So Andrea, if you start first, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm Andrea Howarth, and I manage the Horizon CDT, Creating Our Lives in Data, which looks at personal data and the digital economy. I'm based at Nottingham, but we're also partnered by DMU. We're very interdisciplinary and fairly diverse for a science-based CDT, especially around the range we've got of neurodiverse students, transgender students, and a really good mix of male and female.
Thank you. And Becky, please.
Hi everybody, my name is Becky Vipond. So my role is in the University of Warwick's Doctoral College, so I have a central administration role. I don't look after one specific CDT, but in my role as PG Scholarships and CDT Coordination Manager, I actually look at all the standards of doctoral training across Warwick's 3 faculties. So everything from arts through social sciences to physical sciences and health and biology as well. So quite a lot of thoughts. So I don't personally run a CDT, but I do talk to all of our administrators who do on a regular basis.
Thank you. And Katie, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Welford. I'm at the University of York and I am the Programme Manager for the Centre for Doctoral Training in Fusion Energy, and we have a new one in Fusion Power. We are a collaboration of 6 universities going into our new programme. So we're quite a large CDT, a lot to think about in terms of how we manage that kind of collaboration across the 6 universities and with all our industry partners and things as well.
Thank you, Lupa. Lupa, can you come put your camera on as well, please, if possible?
Sorry. Hi, I'm trying desperately to get on the camera, and for some goddamn reason, it is just not accepting me at all. So I'll keep trying that, but I've done it 3 or 4 times, and it is just not. If I do the camera, I'm blank. So
if you just introduce yourself, then please, Lupa. Think you may have gone. James, if you go next, please.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. So my name's James Mackay. I'm a CDT manager. I've managed 3 CDTs for the past 15 years. I'm currently managing the Water Wiser one at the University of Leeds, which is a multi-site CDT like the Fusion one. And it's all about shit and how we manage it.
Lupa, are you back on? Okay, we start with without Lupa then. And my first question to the panel is, in terms of sharing best EDI practice, what do you find useful? And if Becky goes first, please.
Certainly. So we have found actually we're quite well resourced in terms of CDTs at Warwick speaking to each other. We have over the years had upwards of 23 running in any given year. So we find that's the best thing to do, is just for CDT administrators and academic leads to speak to each other about what they're doing. The way that we helped this in the Doctoral College centrally at Warwick was that we ran a specific PGR EDI working group, which looked particularly at sort of different aspects of how to help manage this. So looking at recruitment practices, looking at student experience, and then looking at supervision support in particular. So how to support supervisors who are supporting PGRs who have diverse needs. Things that, sort of in the interest of being very, very honest in this group, it's really difficult. We find that the lack of direction from funders and research councils can be quite troubling, that individual academics get a bit worried about being overly bold in this space because they don't want to put things into bids that either they can't actually action or that might not be the right thing, might not be the right direction. Simultaneously, when we speak to funders, my experience is particularly speaking with EPSRC, is that they're actually they want universities to be bold, but that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect there between what PIs want to write in bids and what funders want to see PIs write in bids. And I have sympathy on both sides of that. But we do have sort of a collection of recommended actions, things like anonymizing applications, running pre-application workshops for PGRs who might be unsure about whether or not they want to take on a PhD, or they're not quite sure what it means. Making sure we've got really well signposted in a number of different ways, signposting all of the support available to PGRs once they actually get here. And yeah, working with supervisors to ensure that they understand what to do if they do get a PGR who's got more diverse needs or a situation they've not come across before. That seems to work quite well. What sort of communities of practice seem to be the best way forwards in this space for us at the moment. However, it's quite ad hoc. It involves working with people who will work with you, which means you're not hitting everybody. And you know, whenever we get feedback from PGRs, they always seem to want more things in more ways in every single direction, and that's not necessarily practical as well. So sort of balancing everybody's expectations alongside their needs is quite complicated.
Thank you, Becky. Katie.
Hi, yeah, so I would say probably something quite similar to what Becky has said in terms of EDI is a really, really big kind of area to try and be expert in when you're running a CDT. It's really important. It should be at the center of everything that you're running, but it can feel very overwhelming when you're trying to address everything that there needs to be in terms of EDI, in terms of recruitment, in terms of you know, training your students, in terms of how you support your students. So it's definitely something where community is really important, where sharing best practice across a number of different communities and cohorts and whatever your connections are is really useful. So one of the things that we've got, and we found very difficult in our previous CDT, we found very, very difficult, particularly after COVID, trying to get people to be on board with our EDI committees, and getting student involvement became very difficult as well. Which we did see kind of across the board. So we've now taken a bit of a spin, and we've gone one of our members of staff so we have an EDI specific academic on the CDT. So there is a specific academic who is a co-I on the bid, and their role for the CDT is to run the EDI. So that's something that's very helpful. That person has then, who is based at Liverpool, is also on in a similar role on the Liverpool Skills Hub, and they've gone, well, why don't we combine the two together and we'll create an EDI hub across the two areas, which can look at EDI on a wider scale. They're going to bring in other CDTs as well, and they're looking to bring in other CDTs in similar areas to ours, or who might be similarly located, so that we can all kind of come together as a network and address at a more national level. And then you get groups of students from different areas who can be involved. You widen your pool, you get more input, and then you can kind of get more of the workload out as a result. So it's not something that we're in the process of putting that in place, but we're all very excited about how that might work and how we move forwards with that. So if someone is already doing something like that and they have any tips, I would be very grateful to hear them as well.
Thank you. And Lupa, you're finally on camera. If you could introduce yourself and then share one aspect of best EDI practice with us, please. You're on mute.
Sorry, everything is going wrong today. Nonetheless, my name is Lupa Murgai, and I am the CDT manager for quantum technologies and also for the new bit of CDT QC2, which is communications. So I have been here for 10 years, and we had been looking into the EDI thing. So since 2018, I would say that we do have some success in this area. Especially, we had very low presentations with women in science. So we do have an EDI network, and we do work with charities where we represent the underrepresented groups and BMEs and stuff like that. So what we find useful is that our students is heavily involved in outreach activities. Now, as Katie has said, during COVID, it was very difficult to get people back in. We had the similar issues, but then we do have cohort mentors. So we have student buddy system, which I had created. So they kind of, help keep a track on what's going on with the students if they need more care, pastoral care, or whatever it is. And that was heavily needed during the COVID sessions. We do have a management team, and we usually I chase them for doing their training on where do you draw the line and unconscious bias and diversity. So that kind of helps them, because we need them on board if we are going to do something with the students. So if they are not aware of it, it's difficult to manage the entire cohort and the alumni team. So we have created this, which has worked with the alumni also with the EDI. So we do have events with them, and we keep a track on how things are going or what else is needed, because I think it's a huge area, and every day it keeps on changing to something else. I mean, so till now, whatever we had been doing seems to have worked, but there is so much more to be done in this area. Sometimes I get at loss as to what more can we do. So we are working with external university, and we found this quite good in terms of doing recruitment fairs and stuff like that. So the representation is there from either of the universities. So broadly saying that if you have specific question as to what we do and how we do it, I would be able to answer that. But broadly speaking, we have tried to do that in recruitment stage. Implemented that. We have done it with our students, kind of having groups of people. We have ED&I committee where we have student representations also, just to make us aware as to if we are missing point on something or not aware of something that has happened or something new. So yeah, this is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you. James, please.
Yeah, so I was just going to reflect on the fact that different areas of science will have different issues. So I've managed a couple of CDTs that are radically different in terms of their equality issues. So in my first CDT, the issue was gender. So I was trying to get more women into the area of science. And then the one that I manage now is extremely diverse and tends to attract a lot of mature students who are from very diverse backgrounds. So it seems to be a function of the area of science that you're involved in that sort of controls what sort of issues you need to prioritize. So the one that we're doing at the moment, we look at contextual admissions, and we've been working with a group that works across Yorkshire universities called YSEED, and they're specifically targeting BME applicants and looking at ways to run recruitment that doesn't depend on the reference and the previous institution sort of reputational regard that it's held in. So yeah, we've been working in that kind of way to improve the diversity there. But I would say that the really good diversity that we do have in the current CDT is more a function of the kind of the subject area. And so each CDT will have a different kind of approach, I would think.
Thank you, James. Becky.
Yeah, so this, I think that's exactly the point, is that EDI is an inclusion is an absolutely gigantic area, and it really has to be tailored to the specific context of what you're trying to achieve. I also find that people, if you're talking to different people, they all have their particular area that they're very, very passionate about, and trying to balance that when you have a large group is quite complex. Some things that we think about and sort of provide advice on that seems to go across the piece, particularly working in multi-partner settings is really, really helpful, because some organisations are way ahead of the curve than others. And so learning from each other is really, really helpful there. But things that can help are sort of anonymising applications, potentially ring fencing scholarships if you're trying to achieve a particular aim in terms of diversifying your student population, or sort of guaranteeing interviews, making sure that everyone who's involved in recruitment has been through the appropriate training and has understood the concept of sort of slowing down decision making, and making sure we're not bringing unconscious biases in more than we need to. Thinking about exactly how you're talking to potential applicants as well. So the sort of the typical way of going about things, where you ask for a research statement and a CV, that's not necessarily accessible to somebody who hasn't got prior experience of that. So you can break that down into asking specific questions as opposed to asking for a CV. It adds up to getting the same information, but going about it in a slightly different way. And then making sure you're sort of speaking to the right people as well at pre-application stage. So are you speaking to the same people that you've always spoken to, or are you going out and looking for different people who you want to recruit, and are they understanding what you're saying as well? And then, of course, working with teams as well. So we have a central inclusion team, which are very, very helpful. A lot of things, they tend to focus on the undergraduate context in institutions. Certainly at Warwick, that seems to be true, but that doesn't mean you can't translate it into a PGR context.
Thank you, Becky. Andrea?
I think you're probably going to come back to some specific situations. So, but very broadly, yes, agree with a lot of what's been said. Tailored really does matter, and I've worked in several different CDTs, and it's radically different what you need in place. Yeah, talking to each other. We have a DTP CDT managers meeting, which I find is probably the place where I find out more about what other people are doing with similar groups of students, because they're all PGRs. I would like the university to do more itself. They do focus on undergraduate, I think, and taught, but I think that's something that's coming, Claudia, isn't it? There is going to be some effort on that. We have an EDI challenge group, which is a mixture of students and some advisors. So Claudia is actually on our group, on myself and other staff that know a little bit about EDI. And they are, just what it says on the tin, they're supposed to be challenging us. They're supposed to come into the CDT and saying, this is what we think you need to do. This is where we've got issues. But I'm finding it difficult to get the students to lead. It still feels like I'm running everything and asking the questions and setting the agenda. So it's a real push. And it is, I do find that hard work. So although students are quite happy to raise issues, they're not necessarily there to kind of help fix them.
Thank you, Andrea. So we've now given a general overview on things, and we will go into the nitty-gritty a little bit further, and then we'll be inviting questions as well. But one of the things I heard was like working together within and across universities with other teams. And that is not easy because it's so specific to certain CDTs. So what works for one might not work for the other. So now we would like to just look at inclusive recruitment, and Becky had already mentioned quite a bit about inclusive recruitment. Is there anything, that you find works for you, CDT? And could I start with Katie, please?
Yeah, so in terms of inclusive recruitment for us, a lot of what we do is led at institutional level by the university. So one of the things I would say is making sure that you're familiar with your own university's policies in terms of how they do things. So a lot of the kind of blind application stage is dictated by the university, and not having blind disabilities information, things like that. The other thing that we do is when we have projects that are sent out on the website, we have a number of statements in place EDI statements that we've had checked by specifically trained groups at university as well, and our projects are all checked before they go on the website. They're all checked by a small panel of academics to determine whether they meet the required level of kind of EDI policies that we have in place, making sure that we have things like, can they be part-time? All projects should be able to be part-time as well as full-time. All projects should not be phrased so that they're not gendered or in any kind of leading any direction, and these are checked by the recruitment lead and also the EDI lead within the CDT itself. So there's kind of a double checking stage, the CDT only stuff and then the wider university. We also have and this is at budget stage, so this may be too late for some CDTs now, but at budget stage we earmark a certain budget for EDI things. One of those things is a kind of support fund that we have in place, so that if we have any candidates who might need additional support, might say, well, I might in certain areas need additional support for childcare, for example, if I'm to attend this part of the training program or this workshop, then we have that fund in place to support those people as well.
Thank you, Katie. Lopa, please.
Hi. So at recruitment stage, we do have a lot of things in place to kind of look into how we are going to do this. But before we have the recruitment, we have throughout the year, so we do have outreach teaching, which is done by the students. And then we have thing which we do is summer internship for undergraduates, so that kind of gives them the taste of what we are all about. Then we have another thing which is called the summer school that we have, that is also for the graduates and the postgraduates to come and see how it is with us. So we do get a lot of representations from across the university, and we can reach out. So now during the recruitment stage, we try and keep a very balanced way of looking into when we are having the interview. So the application doesn't really give us the entire picture of that. So we try and have as many interviews as it is possible to have with them, because some of them are not very good at expressing themselves when you're writing a statement. And they are very good when you're interviewing, and you can ask questions and you get to know a lot. So we have discovered through the years that it is, if we find somebody interesting to a 0.5% also, we would like them if they can come for an interview, just to see if we can explore more, and also to give them the opportunity about as I said, women in science, we really lack that, and we don't want to lose that opportunity. We don't have representations from a lot of other sectors, so we would want that they should be joining the program, and we like to see that the opportunities provided for them. So that's one way of kind of looking into the EDI aspect of that. During recruitment stage, now, so we have an MRes and we have a PhD. Now, as you know, with the visa situation and the surcharges, it's quite a lot. So we do have a hardship fund for the students to apply for it. And this is done anonymously, so to say, and they just put in a statement, and we just review that and see whether we can help them in any way. But the problem which I find at this moment is we can't do anything for any student if they are not registered as a student. So I'm talking about the new people who are coming in now, and the surcharge is so much, the overseas I'm talking about. And for the life of me, I cannot find a way to help them because they are not registered students. So here, it is a kind of a losing battle over here. So UCL will say that, oh, they are not students, so there is no hardship fund. There is no way I can give them the fund, even if I have the fund.
Wow. Thanks, Luca.
So, yeah, thank you.
So, James, is there anything you do that hasn't been mentioned yet?
Yeah, I mean, I would fully agree with Lopa about the NHS surcharge and the visa costs sort of basically disqualifying anyone who isn't independently wealthy from taking up a place in a PhD. But I would maybe talk about neurodiversity. So we have implemented giving out all of our interview questions in advance and telling students exactly what they will be, and what we will ask them to do during the interviews. We actually did that for quite a long time before we really sort of understood that students appreciated that. It was something that I sort of instigated, and it's never really made a difference to how the students approach the interviews. There's a lot of them still are completely clueless about what the question will be, even though they've had it way in advance and should have prepared for it. But that does help, and we've had feedback from students saying that that's really helped them. And also something I would say is we used to have in-person kind of event days where the interview would be part of an event day where students had to kind of perform in a group exercise and that kind of thing. And we don't do that anymore, because we mainly do the interviews online. But if we did do that, which I know that some CDTs in our university do, we'd have to think really carefully about how to manage those for those students that really would not perform very well in those sort of group exercises and the in-person kind of intimidating interview, which we know from our CDT events is the kind of thing that our students who've reported neurodiverse issues really struggle with.
Thanks, James. I've seen there a couple of questions, but if I just ask the Andrea and then Becky, is there anything you do for inclusive recruitment that hasn't been mentioned yet? Andrea first, please.
Yeah, just a kind of couple of minor things, I guess. One is we make it very clear on our, well, we finished recruitment now. We have 4 selection criteria. They're clearly listed on the website. We have a personal statement template, which has basically the 4 criteria again, and the students answer against those 4 criteria. And when they come for interview, effectively, they're being asked about those 4 criteria again. And we have found, and it's just, we did that because we were getting so many speculative applications, and it was a way of making people answer the question and cut down the number of spurious applications. However, as a byproduct, we've been told by our neurodiverse students that they really appreciated that because they kind of knew what it was they were writing in each section. When we interview, we always ask for any support requirements and pronouns and preferred names. We didn't provide questions in advance unless it came up as a support need. And then we'd only actually provide them really on the day because we didn't really find it made any difference. And we had interview days, so we try and bring a bunch of students in for the day, but we didn't do a lot of group work or anything like that. But we would make sure we had plenty of students around for them to talk to during the day, and they would hopefully see the natural kind of diversity of the current student body, because we were very lucky that we were all a reasonably diverse thing. So, you know, we've had students coming in saying, oh, I didn't expect to meet another transgender person, you know, when I came for interview. That was really good to know, and things like that. So yeah, those are like sort of minor tweaks, I guess, on what else has been discussed.
Thank you. And Becky?
So I'd quite like to pick up the point that Lipa was making about NHS surcharges and things like that. So at Warwick, we have managed to provide a very small bursary to a very select number of students. It's a pilot, which has had a 100% success rate at bringing people actually onto campus. We had the same discussions with our finance team about risk, providing funding to somebody who wasn't yet registered at their institution. But we did manage to do it by keeping the numbers small and highlighting that really all we're doing is putting off a future hardship fund application, as we also run a hardship fund. However, the point to make here is that these programs, these CDTs, are funded by UK research councils, and as institutions, if we solve this problem for research councils, then it takes some of the pressure off them to sort of make provision themselves. So we have not provided that for UKRI, EPSRC, etc. funded programmes, principally for that reason, which institutionally, talking to councils is one thing, but it has a massive impact on actual individuals, which is quite disheartening. It's difficult to be working in that space. But we have found that it's incredibly useful for one of the internally funded scholarships that I also look after. So it's we have a vehicle now. It's just trying to work out how to sort of manage this when we're also talking about multiple stakeholders, approaches from research councils and that sort of thing as well. It's really tricky, and we're putting people off. We offer them a scholarship and then say, oh, by the way, you need £5,000 to actually get here. Who has £5,000? Even if you're not coming in from an LDC country or something like that, it's a huge amount of money to find in one space. So yeah, really, really tricky. So that's
Thank you.
I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. And Maria, you had your hand up for ages. Please ask your question.
Thank you very much. I have a question for James, please. I'm interested in asking for some details about how whether the making the interview questions available to candidates who are neurodiverse, is this a measure that is exclusively implemented for neurodiverse candidates who disclose their condition, or is this something that you would offer to everyone? So my question here is to ask, how do you get the information about conditions that or other disabilities that candidates may have, and how do you keep control of this data? And secondly, whether this is a measure that may open you up to a accusation of not equally fair approach to your interview guidance. I hope this explains it well. I represent the DTP, and we do, when we invite candidates to an interview, we have a paragraph that's offers the option of someone approaching the chair of the interview panel if they have a specific requirement in relation to a condition or a disability that they have. So it would be helpful to know how you deal with that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria. So in short, we make the interview questions available to everybody. And as I say, it doesn't seem to make any difference. We still get students who are completely unprepared and have obviously never even looked at those interview questions. But we have had feedback that the neurodiverse people from different areas do appreciate that and having that certainty. So yes, we've done that. And we do offer students different support if they request it. So we make the point that when we ask them to interview, to alert us to any sort of disability needs that they might have during the interview. I mean, we had one person who couldn't endure sunlight, so we had to do all the interviews in the dark. So that was a strange one. But yeah, we do accommodate as much as we can.
Thanks, James. Lupa, you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question for Rebecca. It's very nice to know that you do have some fund, but how did you manage to do that if they are new students who are not registered in your university now? I mean, I have the money, but I have no means of kind of giving out the money. So how did you get around that?
So what we did was we put together a very small budget, and we made the case to our head of central finance that we are able to provide a one-off payment to these people as if they're sort of external to the university. We restricted the risk down by restricting it to one specific scholarship scheme, and those people had to be holding a scholarship offer which provided full fees and stipend payment, and they had to have met all of the conditions of their both their scholarship and their place at Warwick, which would include achieving ATAS clearance as well. So the chances are this person is coming to the university. If they've already managed to get through, it's a very, very competitive scholarship. It's about 2% success rate. So there is a small risk that we would provide a one-off payment of £4,000 to somebody who would disappear off and never actually turn up at the university. But the chances of that were very, very small. And what we found in the first year that we did it, we provided 8 awards and all 8 of those candidates turned up, which then reassured our colleagues in central finance that this was going to be okay. This year we've made 5 awards. So we also have the students do need to apply for this, but we don't just give it out to everybody. They have to apply to us. They have to provide a statement. We don't ask for any additional supporting information, but they have to make a statement about how they fit a specific set of criteria. I can put the link to the webpage and that we put together into this chat, so you can have a look at that. So yeah, there is a risk that we would provide that, but to be honest, I mean, £4,000 it's not really a huge amount of money when you're talking about of less than 10 students. The budget's not massive, and then I don't quite know how we managed to just get it through, because everyone I speak to in other institutions is still stuck on the stage that we were also stuck on 2 years ago of, well, no, hang on, we can't just pay students when they're not here. So it doesn't go through the same process as where we pay stipend payments. It's put through as a separate process where they have to provide their bank details, and it goes through one of our sort of and a one-off payment for an external person process is how we do that.
Thank you. And a final question, Linda.
Yeah, it was. So I've been involved in a CDT that has a central recruitment process. So all students apply to the sort of CDT management bit, and then I've just started on another CDT where the applications are going sort of to the individual institutions, and I don't know whether it's a question or whether it's just they're obviously very different processes for recruitment, and the one where the one I've been working on has sort of 5 institutions, and we take all the applications in. The students apply to the CDT, they get their letter of funding, and then they apply to the host institution, whereas the new one I'm working on is the opposite. And how you manage that EDI when there's no consistency in how CDTs recruit, and where this one is where we are sort of dealing with our own recruitment, it doesn't seem to be very consistent, and how you can get consistency in that type of recruitment process, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yes, it does, Linda. So I've experienced both, like you, recruitment via the CDT itself, and then recruitment via the different partner universities. And I think maybe there needs to be more national steer on how this is best done. So because it seems like everybody does it slightly differently, and the data we also need to generate for EPSSC are more or less robust depending on which approach you take. So it would be nice to for the research councils to give CDTs actually more of a steer that recruitment is fair and square across the nation, if that makes sense. But Katie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say our situation is very, very similar because we're 6 universities and each university does things differently. So we have a recruitment lead for the CDT, and the recruitment lead does produce kind of guidance and policies that we ask all of the universities to generally follow. They do their best to kind of fold that into their own processes, but there are certain universities that can be a little bit more sticky in terms of getting up to speed with kind of the EDI policies and practices that we have. So I would say you're not in a lonely territory. I think this is very, very common, and we have a number of so we used to do our recruitment where we have plasma students and material students, and different universities add to, different universities cover that different area. So there's 3 universities that cover plasma students, there's 3 that cover material students. So the plasma students as a group used to do all of their recruitment as one. So we would get all the applications for those students at York, and then they would also apply to Liverpool or Durham or wherever it is, and then they could choose, if they got an offer from here or an offer from here, they could choose where it was they wanted to go. Materials was different. They would go to individual, they would only go to the individual university they're applying for. I think you can only do your best with what you've got, if that makes sense. So if you have a CDT kind of guidance that you can provide to each of your universities and say, as a CDT, we would like you to do this based on the policies that we have. But at the end of the day, the CDT is not a legal institution. It's not a legal governing body. So we can't kind of dictate to the institutions how they do things. We kind of have to work within what the institution rules and policies are.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And I think the other challenge we've got, which I'm sure most people have been through, is that the new CDT was awarded in April. We've got to get students on seats for September. And
Yeah.
I don't think when I read through, because I wasn't involved in the proposal, but when I read through the proposal, the EDI commitments, you just have to sort of, because there's this panic to get students in, which doesn't feel right. But
Yeah,
I think that's again, it's a funder thing, because you don't get given long enough to really all the resources to get this in place properly for that first cohort.
And I think it's much harder if you're a brand new CDT than if you're an existing CDT that's on continuation. So we're existing, we're on continuation. We've got, we don't have any startups, so we've kind of got a bit more of a buffer to kind of help us through. If you're brand new, I feel for you, because that is such a big undertaking to get from April to September and all the stuff you have to do. But hopefully Claudia will agree with this, but as the PRISM network, we're here to kind of help and support each other. So if you want support with things, or if you have questions about how do I do this or how do I do that, I think if you reach out through the PRISM network, someone will answer your question and help if we can.
Yeah, and don't forget, the chat box is the QR code. If you do anything, that you think works, please put it in, and we can circulate this amongst the group. So I had actually prepared quite a few EDI questions, and I don't think we'll go through all of them. The question is whether we would like to have another session on, for example, inclusive training event, but maybe one question that the panel can answer in the remaining time is, what EDI training do you offer to your students and staff? And if Lupe goes first, please.
So we do have a few training that we offer to the staff, and as I said, that would be your mental health first aider sort of a course, which is given to the students as well as the staff, just to support. Then we have conscious and bias training that we have for unconscious bias training, that is for the staff and the supervisors. For the supervisors, we also have training to be a supervisor. It's just what do you call that? If they have trained 3 years back, so there's a refresher course that they have to do. We encourage them to do it. Although I say encourage them to do it, it's very difficult for the academics to kind of do it finally. For the students, we do have trainings which actually depends on what exactly they want. So if we see a cohort and we see the cohort struggling to bond together, so we do have icebreaker sessions, which we do as networking, and it is in the beginning of the course that we do that. Throughout the stage of the cohort, we have some activities, like we have got winter school where we take them away for a week, and they are in a lodge. Basically, we have lectures, workshops, stuff like that. So there's a lot of bonding that goes on with that. We do have alumni events where we call in our alumni from who have kind of left us 4 or 5 years back. So they all come together, they share their experiences. So we found that quite useful. So instead of having some training as an RR1 training and all these kind of ad hoc trainings that we have, helps us understand the cohort, helps us what areas they'd like to go further on, and to help them mentor and to help them have a buddy system in place. So these are the things that we usually do with our cohorts.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Lopa has said. That's all the things that we do. I don't think we have any specific EDI training for our students, but as I've said, in our CDT, it's actually the students kind of giving our staff the training, because they are really hot on it. They've actually given training to EPSRC, to their EDI committee. So they're all into lots of different aspects of EDI considerations, especially applied to their own research. So in the current CDT, we wouldn't even attempt to give them a kind of a generic EDI training. We sort of listen to them in their research, and several of them are actually undertaking kind of EDI topics within their research. So we're kind of learning from that process.
Thank you, James. Andrea?
Yeah, that's really interesting, James. I might try and catch up with you about that, because yeah, we're in a slightly similar situation, that students are far better informed than anybody else. So in terms of EDI training for students, then in our welcome week, we've always had an EDI session run by other students, which has always been probably the most useful thing that we do in that welcome week. Our responsible innovation module covers EDI within research. So it is covered there. We don't do much, again, we don't do much ourselves. It is mainly signposting to the resources around the university. One issue for us is that some students with protected characteristics are, like James said, doing research in EDI areas that are very closely linked to their own personal circumstances, which makes for a really difficult PhD. We'd like to be able to help them more, but we're not sure how. The nearest thing we can think of is that it's a bit like lived experience research in medicine or something like that. But we're definitely not equipped to do it, and it's not something you can teach in a classroom. So James, I might get in touch with you later. For the staff, again, we're not responsible for what supervisors and other trainers do, but we do encourage. Our team does any EDI training that's offered that's relevant, and we encourage supervisors and trainers to do it as well. And for anybody that's coming and doing training, we have a kind of standard email sheet that's sent out that's got some of the basic principles. It says something about the cohort, so it explains that they're going to find, a mixture of students with who may have different issues, and then hopefully gives them the space to kind of factor that in and make sure that they deal with the group appropriately.
Thank you. Becky, and then Katie, please.
So at an institutional level, staff complete social inclusion training. We're all expected to do that, and we do. Students all sign up to the Warwick Values training. They do that upon enrolment each year. That's undergraduate through to PGR. So that's the sort of basics. Some CDTs leave it at that. Some CDTs take it further. We have similar things where it really depends on the area of research. Some CDTs, again, similar to other things, have lots of students working in that sort of area. We have quite a lot of research in that sort of area at Warwick, particularly in our education studies department. They have some really interesting projects going on that we're also using to learn from and implement around things like application stage and that sort of thing. And we also have supervision communities of practice, in particular around sort of supporting neurodiverse students or something like that. but it's a really mixed bag. And it really depends on the setup of an individual CDT, whether they have an EDI champion. I mean, hopefully they do, but depends on how clued up that EDI champion is, what their particular background is. And often it's driven by things happening or by the student body themselves. If they're a particularly switched on cohort for that sort of activity, then we would follow their lead as well and hopefully capture that and share best practice. But yeah, so it's a really mixed bag, but we do cover the basics for everybody for sure.
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, so in terms of staff training, it's fairly similar, I think, across everyone else. It's institutionally led. A lot of it is online training. Our university has gotten a bit better recently, I think, because they've signed up with LinkedIn Learning. So actually there's a much wider breadth of kind of training available in terms of EDI and unconscious bias and things like that on the learning development system now than there was. For students, actually, we have quite an interesting approach. On the last CDT, we found that certain incidences were happening where we needed to respond with specific training for the students. So particularly certain things to do with, again, we're a science CDT. We have a very low percentage of female to male members of cohorts, and there were certain things that were happening that we needed to address. So we kind of rearranged the funding, the budget slightly so that we could use some of the money towards specific training. We also had a couple of consultancies done with specific EDI EDI specialists who did kind of an audit of the CDT and where we needed to improve and how we could improve and all that kind of stuff. And then as we went into the new CDT, we specifically earmarked EDI training within the budget. So the plan is now that they will have 3 points of contact throughout the year where we can provide them with EDI training from specialists that can address things like microaggressions, allyship, unconscious bias, imposter syndrome, all of that kind of stuff. The first one is in the induction week, so we get our first set of cohort as they come into induction week. We go, right, here we go. This is where we believe EDI to be. We want you all to be kind of trained up in the same at the same level, and then our plan is to have a point of contact later on in the year that captures all of the students that we have, so they all have updated training every year. We actually found that we tried to do some student-led EDI training, and a number of other students from minority backgrounds didn't respond well to that and weren't appreciative of that approach. They wanted to have specialists teaching these areas, and so we're quite conscious that we need to bring in specialists, and you know, we've thought, well, could we do it ourselves? I'm not really comfortable leading EDI training myself because I'm not a specialist in that area, and I think it should come from people who are more trained than I am to train. So yeah, that's how we do it.
Thank you, Katie. I think one of the most eye-opening things we did recently, each year we have a residential school, and one of the EDI activities we gave to the students was, what EDI consideration do we need to think about when we are organizing our next spring school? You know, and one of the results that came out that was, it is not okay to pay things and claim back. And we kind of, you know, when people travel, you try to pay as much as you can, but they go for meals, they have to claim back and stuff. And this is something we probably need to look at, because it's definitely not okay for everybody. So we are coming to the end of our session. We didn't go through all our questions. I put in a feedback form that also asked for what other sessions you'd be interested in. If you wanted us to go into EDI again, please mention that, and we can look at running, you know, inclusive events, training events, and what considerations there are. I thought it was a really informative session. Can we all give a round of applause to our fabulous panel members, please? It was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I also, if you know of anybody who's not yet a member, or if any of you would like to become a PRISM committee member, so we are all volunteering our time, please do let us know. And with that, thank you everybody for attending, and have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully see most of you again next week when we talk about data analysis. And Katie, who was the panel member today, she will be chairing this session. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks, Claudia.